Then next we'll head into the Paragon.
I think we are all set up here. All right, we have the Paragon. So I think Taylor's going to give me a break here and talk about this one. And I'll be back later to talk about the Ritualist.
Right. So the Paragon, obviously well-known profession from Guild Wars 1. Long asked for it again, like a lot of the ones we've been showing off. We're going to get to Ritualist later. Part of the lore is like, in our game, Palawa Joko kind of like crushed the Sun Spears and Paragons, but, you know, spoiler alert, he's gone now. So Paragon as a profession has kind of come back up, kind of latched onto Warrior, and started, you know, inspiring their allies again. Talking about the gameplay loop, we're taking what was core to Paragon. It's a heavily supportive elite specialization, and then kind of merging it to Warrior, mixing with its mechanics, how would a Warrior support its allies and command the battlefield as a Paragon once did. So we can look at the UI, and you notice you have your burst skill there, and you also have 3 new buttons, and then a little outline of something that we'll get to. To start, it uses level 1 burst skills like Spellbreaker, because those other 3 buttons, their chance, they'll also be consuming adrenaline, so we wanted to make sure that management was a bit easier. The spec can be pretty adrenaline hungry. And so level 1 burst skills just made sense. But then we can start talking about the chance. That's really where the profession mechanics start, you know, happening, making sense. So we'll hover over Chant of Action. It's going to be your first one. This is going to be your more offensive chant, and it has a couple components here. Pretty big tooltip. The first thing that happens when you activate a chant is it's going to cost adrenaline, normal 10, like a normal burst skill. And for this one, have an initial effect. This one is that it's granting boons to your allies. And then after you activate it, a kind of passive effect called a refrain will start activating around you every interval. And so there's refrains. You see there's like 3 levels of him based on motivation. And motivation is a resource that you're going to gain when you use a burst skill. So the general gameplay flow is that you're going to turn on a chant, get a bit of motivation to start, then you're going to want to use burst skills or other chants to build your motivation even higher, so you get high levels of those refrains that are going to give pretty strong bonuses, depending on how much motivation you have. That's kind of the core of what this all says. We can move on to the second chant. That's going to be Chant of Recuperation. This one is a lot more supportive. It's going to be your healing one. So when you activate this one, you're going to give your allies a bit of barrier to kind of sustain them until the healing pulses can come through. And as you can see, you're going to pulse healing that's dependent on how much your motivation level is, as well as, you know, at the max, you're going to also be able to pulse resistance, pretty strong boon. This one, you can see the motivation cost is higher than the Chant of Action, so it's going to cost more and be harder to upkeep. So perhaps, you know, build up a lot of motivation when you're using your Chant of Action, and then you swap over to the Chant of Recuperation to get those really strong pulses, and so that doesn't completely drain you of the motivation as you use it. And then the last chant that we have is going to be the Chant of Freedom. This one is going to be your more utility kind of defensive shout that we have. When you first activate it, you're going to break stun from allies in an area, so it's a pretty powerful effect. And then it's also going to grant boons when you pulse based on your motivation. You can see that it starts, you know, pretty weak with swiftness, but then builds up Nexus Resolution, and then finally have a really strong stability effect. And you can see that instead of unlike the other two, this one's motivation cost is more scaling. The higher the motivation you have, the more it's going to cost. So trying to upkeep that stability is pretty hard, but keeping it at a low level 1 is going to be a lot easier. So those 3 kind of comprise what you want to be doing. You kind of always want to be having a chant active. You're getting bonuses as you swap between them from activating these chants, as well as just general burst skills in between.
Yeah, obviously, Burst Mastery is going to be a great trait to take. Just give you that refund. You're going to be using so many bursts that refund is going to be even more noticeable, kind of similar to when we see it on Spellbreaker, using burst into full counter into burst, getting pretty good refunds there. And that's going to allow you to really set up that motivation and get up to those high tiers, getting that stability or, you know, that resistance, those really key boons.
Yeah, I think the thing that you're going to have to get used to when playing this spec is like extra energy management, keeping the motivation up, being able to track how much you have and how much you want to use so you don't drain too much, so you're able to call on those high motivation chants when you want to. Then we can go into The utilities are going to be command. In Guild Wars 1, Paragons had pretty commanding presence on the battlefield. We wanted to extend that to this. These are going to be similar to some other effects we have in the game, as shouts, the tails we showed on Troubadour. They're going to be ally effects as you use them. And the special kind of hook into this is that they all have an echo. So when you use them, an initial effect is going to happen, and then kind of like your chance, after 3 seconds, an echo will happen. But you can speed up that echo by using a burst skill. So you can use your normal burst skill or your chance, but when you activate that, it'll trigger the echo no matter how much duration had left on that interval. So the correct timing, you can really get it like right back to back, and potentially get a pretty powerful effect all at once. So starting with the heal, we have We Shall Return. First part of it, pretty simple, a lot like ally heals. You're going to heal yourself, heal allies around you, and then its echo effect is it's going to heal for a lesser amount, but also cleanse conditions. Pretty bread and butter what you want out of your handling slot as a support. And again, timing it correctly, making sure you have adrenaline before you use these commands can make it so that you get a lot of upfront value at once. We can move to the other utilities. The first one we have is Find Their Weakness. This one's going to be a more offensive command. It's going to strike and apply vulnerability to allies around you, and then after the echo triggers, you're going to get might based on how many enemies you struck. And, pretty offensive leaning, of course. It's a lot of vulnerability and might, so it's a big swing in damage. And as well, it hits 5 targets, which can be pretty beneficial, especially on this spec. As we mentioned, adrenaline hungry. 5 hits is, 5 more ticks of adrenaline. So this can be a good builder for you. It's a low cooldown. Just a good button to be pressing to keep up, the assault in PvE, PvP, keep your allies' damage up. Next, we can move on to Never Surrender. This one's going to be a more defensive command. You're going to break stun and grant yourself boons. And then there's a little additional effect that we're trying here. We'll try it in some other specs as we'll see next week. It's going to be a break stun that has a longer cooldown if you successfully use the break stun effect. This is kind of trying to play with the power level we can put on a stun break. So if you use a skill without breaking a stun, it'll have a lower cooldown. So kind of like knowing that you're not going to get the value from the stun break there, so you can use it a bit more and play with how you want to save your cooldowns in a fight. But we can move on to the echo effect for this. This is going to echo and give your allies the same boons. These are pretty important boons, so again, want to make sure that you're able to use that interval when you want it to happen. So it can be a pretty interesting. This whole stun break recharge increase is new, and definitely something we're going to keep an eye on and feedback around. It's something pretty interesting. Never been done before. Could be good. People could not like it. Very open to feedback around it.
Gives you some additional decision making of there's less opportunity cost in using a skill like this without, if you just want the defensive component, you want the resistance, you want the resolution, that's much more of an option when it's a 15-second recharge as opposed to when it's a 30-second recharge. So if you just want to use that in combat to go aggressive with that resistance, then that is much more of a realistic choice.
We can next command is going to be Brace Yourselves. This is kind of your basic defensive command. It's going to apply barrier and then more barrier on the echo. So this one is, as it says, when you want to brace yourself, you see a big hit coming. Your allies are already at full, but give them a barrier to make them even more tanky versus whatever hit's about to come in. Pretty good to keep your allies topped up with that barrier. Simple defensive skill. It's what you want out of that slot sometimes. Then lastly, we have On Your Knees. This one's also going to be an offensive command. You're going to do the damage and cripple around when you use it. And again, it's going to hit 5 enemies. That's pretty good adrenaline gain. And then when it echoes, you're going to damage again, more adrenaline, and apply weakness to the enemies, making them do less damage to you, have less endurance in PvP, weakness, pretty good condition, and with a large radius. The crippling here could be interesting, especially tactics as a trait line that Paragon is probably going to want to take. Get leg specialists, have an AoE immobilize, pretty good effect. So this skill can be, I think, deceptively good based on the minor effects and how you trait into changing what it does. But then we can get to the elite skill, and the elite skill is one we showed, or we talked about in the blog post, showed in the video, and everyone, super cool effect. Having those Paragon wings, it's We Will Never Yield. When you use it, you're going to get a buff on yourself where you cannot fall below 0, save, some PvE boss effects. But basically, for the most part, you can't die, which is very strong. And then kind of like rebound is when this buff falls off. You're going to gain barrier, and the barrier is going to scale based on how low your health was. Because denying death can be pretty powerful, but when damage is like constantly coming at you, you can live it at 1, and then if you don't get a little bolster after that, you just fall over. So that barrier is there. It's a little pillow to make sure that you're able to heal your allies and everyone up when that effect ends. And so the echo here is going to be how you give your allies that buff. So I think out of all the commands, this one is the most important to have lined up with a chant or a burst skill to give your allies that buff. Because it's something that you really want to time well, because if you do it a bit late, it's too late, they're dead. So trying to add a bit of skill expression here, just to add an extra caveat when you use a skill if you want to use it correctly. That kind of covers commands, how they play, so we can move on to the traits. First trait is going to be Rally the Valiant, just talking about motivation and the stuff we covered with the chants. The next minor trait is going to be Inspiring Implements. Gain motivation when you use your 4th and 5th weapon skills. It's kind of a new trigger that we're playing around with. Can kind of influence the weapons you want. Maybe some weapons have a longer cooldown on the 4 and the 5, and that matters to you. You really want that motivation building, so you choose to go an offhand that has maybe lower ones. I think Warhorn is a weapon that you can use the 4 and 5 slot decently freely, so a lot of motivation building built up, but just kind of the gist here is that it's a little extra motivation gain outside of your burst skills. Then we can move on to the Grandmaster Minor, which is Unyielding Resolve. Strike and condition damage dealt to you is reduced for each point of motivation you have. This is going to be a basic defensive trait, something a supportive character would want. You can't heal your allies if you're dead, so just kind of a passive defense to make sure you can stay on the battlefield, keep healing people. Then we move to the Adept here. The first one's going to be Call to Action. This one's going to trigger Chant of Action when you get into combat. This will give you those motivation stacks and start the Might and Fury pulsing. It's pretty good to kickstart how you play in a fight. When you first get into the fight with the spec, you want to build up adrenaline so you keep those chants. This one kind of just accelerates that happening. Already gives you basically 10 free adrenaline. So in a longer, drawn-out encounter, this probably isn't giving you too much value, but I think in small skirmishes, or if you're in the open world constantly going from place to place, getting this free Chant of Action can be a lot of value at once and really just make it feel a bit smoother to play.
As you guys can see, it doesn't put the actual Chant of Action on cooldown, so you can get that initial activation, then even use Chant of Action again to get that extra motivation if you so choose.
Right. Then the next Adept trait, we're going to have Calming Ton. This one is just some small bonuses for a supportive trait. If, Chant of Action or Call to Action doesn't appeal to you, this one just gives you a bit of additional concentration and healing power, so more boon duration, more healing, what you want to be doing as a support. Coming out of the Adept here, just making sure that you always have a chant active to get the bonus from this. Then lastly, we have Liberating Liaise. It's going to grant you increased movement speed, and then movement impairing conditions have reduced effectiveness on you. The movement speed is a thing that we see on a lot of traits. Warrior Sprint, this is an alternative to it if you don't want to be taking that trait. But the movement impairing conditions have reduced effectiveness is pretty new. Usually we just do reduced duration, but these are going to change how much you actually get slowed. So Cripple will slow you for less, Chill will slow you for less, which can be pretty impactful, especially in PvP scenarios. As a support, you don't want to get caught. You want to make sure you have good positioning, so this is going to help you out with that. Then we can move to the Master tier. The first one we have is Brisk Pacing. Using a chant reduces the recharge of your other chants by a set amount. This is just going to incentivize you for swapping your chants. Don't sit on Chant to Action constantly pulsing Might and Fury. Want you to be swapping between the heal, between the swiftness, the stability. And if you're doing that off cooldown, you're going to get a lot of cooldown reduction for this. So if you have the adrenaline build up to support it, you can be really getting a lot of those, specifically the activated effects a lot. So a lot of power there behind that. Then we can move on to the middle one, which is Invigorating Tempo. This one's going to be a more sustained trait. Heal yourself and gain adrenaline for each point of motivation spent. So again, as with that Grandmaster Minor we talked about, you really want survivability on a support spec so that, you can keep supporting your allies and devote more of your cooldowns to them rather to yourself. And the adrenaline here is going to be a nice little refund Cost adrenaline to get motivation, so getting some adrenaline back is kind of be like almost a burst mastery-like effect to keep it so that you don't feel too starved of adrenaline in certain situations. Then lastly, we have Reverberation. This one's going to be the utility skill trait for the spec. Command's echo can trigger a second time. So going through all those echoes we talked about, the intervals, they have the potential with this trait to get them all twice, which, elite, that's a pretty strong effect. But, just making your heal better, getting more barrier, you get a lot of value out of this based on how many of those commands you have. The trigger for this will kind of work as you expect it to. It'll have like the same interval, so you use it. After 3 seconds, the echo effect will happen. Then after another 3 seconds, another echo will happen. But you can speed both those up with the burst skills. Use a command, then you use your burst skill. It happens again. Then you can use a burst skill right after to get that other echo. And get a drink before we cover the Grand Masters. So the first Grandmaster is going to be Feverish Pulse. This one is going to be kind of like how you support with boons in game modes. In PvE, it's going to be Alacrity. And Alacrity support is something that people have known has been missing from Warriors kind of kit for a while. So this is going to be enabling the Paragon to step into that role, hopefully do it really well, something we want to be seeing people do in PvE. And in competitive modes, this one's actually going to give quickness. In World v World, complete with those Firebrands, those Chronomancers, that quickness is a powerful boon there, and give it a little edge in PvE to be in PvP to be a more offensive support. Something that Warrior is known for when you pick it is really making your allies, giving them a lot of might, making them hit harder. So this is kind of like carving out its niche there with this trait. We can go to the others. If we go to the middle one, we have Strengthening Stanzas. This one is going to be your more selfish trait. If you don't have allies running around the World v World, you want to play Paragon. This is kind of the trait you don't want to play Paragon with a group. This is the trait you want to take. You can see that you get a different bonus based on based on which chain you have activated. Chain of Action is going to give you pretty big damage modifier. Chain of Recuperation, pretty big incoming damage reduction. Chain of Freedom is a really large movement speed. So this has a lot of powerful effects behind it based on which one you have active. In competitive modes, you could also take this. Maybe you don't need additional support for your allies. You just need to be, have that really big damage, reduced damage incoming or really high movement speed. So you can take this trait potentially and still be a pretty good support. So a lot of potential behind this one. And then lastly, we have Enduring Refrain. This one is going to make basically all your chants better as you activate them. This one's going to crank your support up to like the max level. It's going to cause Chain of Action to grant more might when you have the refrain going. Recuperation is going to heal more, and then Freedom is going to get increased boon duration. And on top of that, it's going to reduce the motivation costs of some of those higher levels. We saw that Recuperation costs 2, it's going to cost 1 now, and then Chant of Freedom, the upper levels will cost less. This, again, making it so you can keep supporting your allies with even if you can't upkeep all of that adrenaline. So kind of seeing in all of those ways, different ways you can support your allies with the Paragon. That kind of, covers the gist of it. Cal's gonna hover over all the tooltips. Any words on Paragon?
Skills, or the traits, got a lot of good hover time, so I'm just gonna go quickly back through the skills. Yeah, I mean, Paragon is a lot of fun, like just having more things to spend your adrenaline on, even more so than like Spellbreaker at the F2. Now we have F2, F3, F4. Obviously, all the adrenaline traits are going to be very powerful, but it just gives you like that extra layer of decision making of like, when do I want to use my adrenaline? When do I need to build up more adrenaline so I can use multiple things back to back to back? And just going to add like a bit more depth to like typical warrior gameplay on top of being like that really strong support warrior that we've really been looking forward to adding to the game. Quickly through the commands here, and then we will transition back to a screen with just 2 of us on camera so that we can get set up for the final specialization today, which will be the Ritualist. Brace yourselves, and finally, we will never yield. Fire that up one more time, get some Paragon wings. And I hope you guys got all your screenshots.